All right, welcome back to Net podcast. We're coming out with a new episode for college football. I know we just put one out for yesterday, but some big news just happened, some breaking news in the college football world, and plus I'm going to preview the games that just happened yesterday since they're fresh, they're ready, big movement in certain games. I'm hoping to push for that finish towards the season with 2 games left remaining next week and then the week of Thanksgiving, which will have some big implications on the college football playoffs and for conference champions and playing for conference tourneys. So today we're going to start with the biggest news. Head coach Jimbo Fisher has been fired. I repeat, Jimbo Fisher has been fired. It's a big news. I think it's honestly been a long time coming. Nothing has really panned out for Jimbo. And if we look at it, it's a big thing. A $75 million buyout. So it's a record. It's one of the most, the firing with the buyout is the largest buyout paid to a college football coach. It nearly eclipsed the amount spent to buy out coaches last season, with last season being $90 million combined to buy him out of the entire, all the coaches last year. And we talk about Jimbo Fisher. He's had an up and down years with Florida State. Texas A&M since he left Florida State. And yes, the records for him haven't been terrible, but they've been kind of mediocre. We're talking about a guy that at one time was the most sought after coach, one of the regarded as one of the best coaches in college football. And we're talking about the guy that won the national championship, almost gave Florida 2 national championships at one point in the Jameis Winston era. Yes, we know about the one that they lost to after going 13-1, losing in the Rose Bowl, the first ever edition of the college football playoffs in 2014 to the Oregon Ducks. But we're talking about 2013, going 14-0, 8-0 in the conference, winning a BCS national championship, being ranked number 1 at that Florida State team. And that Florida State team was very, very good, the 2013 squad, with the likes of Timmy Jerrigan, Ronald Darby, just to name a few. LaMarcus Joyner was one. One of the best kickers in college football, and Robert Aguayo. And then the Heisman Trophy winner, Jameis Winston. Him leading that team against Auburn to win, and winning the ACC championship, and winning was the consensus national champion. And then he gets that big money move. Actually, in 2017, with Florida State, his last year, he was 5-6. And then he gets that big move After that, he moves on to Texas A&M as after he resigned, and then he signs that 10-year, $75 million contract in 2018, and then got the extension in 2020 during the pandemic when um, he took Texas A&M to a 9-1 record during the pandemic season, 8-1 the conference, and they went to the Orange Bowl. They were ranked 4th overall, and we're talking about a guy that was always ranked. Like his teams were always ranked, except for in 2017 was Florida State, and they were within the top 25. Only 3 times they were ranked within the top 15. Everything else has been top 10. Then he goes to Texas A&M. He's only been ranked twice in the AP polls at 16-4. And that was during the pandemic year, and then his first season when he went 9-4. After that, after getting there, he's had a mediocre career at Texas A&M. We're talking about an 8-5 record, 8-4, 5-7, and then this year 6-4. But they have struggled, and like I said, last year going 5-7 in 2022, they have barely honestly improved this season. That yes, they're 6-4, but since the extension, Jimbo has got 9-13 since signing that extension in the SEC, and you're brought in to dethrone Georgia, dethrone Alabama, and you haven't done that. Yes, you set a record of 45-25, and that's pretty good. But when you go 27-21 overall in your career in the SEC, that is not good. And you think about what Texas A&M has done over the past few years, even in the recruiting. We talk about this year, 2024 recruiting, they're ranked number 9. We talk about in 2023, they had the number 10 overall class. And even before that, in 2022, over the last kind of number 22, you bring in the number 1 recruiting class in 2022, and in 2022 you go 5-7. That is an alarming rate. Yes, people are going to say, "Oh yeah, they brought in these guys, this really good recruiting class, but they're not experienced enough. They're not going to win you games." And we've seen teams go out and have one of the best recruiting classes and not produce. But then we talk about the teams that go out and get these all these 5 stars like Ohio State, and they can produce, or at Michigan. Jimbo's been a good. I think Jimbo's a good coach. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a really good coach. He's a really good offensive minded coach. I just think leaving Florida State and going to Texas A&M really shows that I just think one, he lost his team. He lost the locker room, I think. I just think he lost the locker room, and then he goes and joins Texas A&M, and it's just not the right fit. I think Florida State was the perfect fit for him. It wasn't going to an SEC team. Yes, SEC and the ACC are both Power 5 conferences, but let's be honest. SEC is a much bigger conference than the ACC, and there's more pressure that comes with it because you're a huge coach. You're going to a good school, a respected school that has produced a lot of good talent and have been really good, like in the Johnny Manziel era with Mike Evans and the Myles Garrett eras and the Deshaun Hall era. Like those, they have produced when they were there. And I just think Jimbo was way over his head. I think he's a great coach and he can do good at a Power 5 school, but not like one of the big ones. And I just think Texas A&M, honestly, on their part, I think they cut the cord a little too late because now they have to buy him out, which is going to exceed around more than $75 million to buy him out, and he still has 8 years remaining on his contract. And we see teams that can get into this issue of, do we pay a coach that we think will be here for that long or can produce? And we've honestly not really seen Jimbo produce at Texas A&M, and Texas A&M is a good school. It's also a disappointing season. Let's be real. Yes, you can say, oh, injuries and losing your starting quarterback and or Weigeman, but when you're having a 6-4 season, but 10 losses in the last 15 games against Power 5 opponents, pretty much just says everything. Like, you bring him in, you have one good season, and then you win the Orange Bowl, and then you go downhill from there. Yeah, 2021 it's 8-4, and then we see another drop off when he goes 5-7 last season. You have 5-7 in the SEC. That's honestly, he probably should have been 5 last year. But it just didn't honestly make too much sense. If you go 5-7, and you really have only gone to what was it, two bowl games since being hired in 6 seasons, and to be one of the highest paid coaches in college football, that's very alarming. And like I said, only sorry. Yes, going to okay, so yeah, they went to 3 bowl games, but only ranked twice. And you're 6 times at being at Texas A&M. It's no words, because you're coming in, like I said, you're coming in to a good school that can recruit well in Texas, known for their football, and you can't, and you have expectations to be ranked, to be a title favorite, going into the season. Not even the title favorite, it's just in contention for a national championship, to play in the college football playoffs. And you look on the other side, you see how good Florida State's doing, and the team you left a few years back, and that success that you see because they have a good coach, they have a good system. It's where the coaches fit. And yes, they're 4-3 in right now in conference play in the SEC. But we're talking about teams that you should be beating. You should be beating Miami. They lost to Miami week 2. You should beat Miami week 2. Like, that's unacceptable. You're coming into the season ranked 23rd in the country. Supposed to contend for a national championship with likes of Jimbo Fisher. Yes, you lose to Bama by 6. But then you go out the next week and lose to Tennessee. You lose to Ole Miss. Yes, these teams might be better, but you should be beating some. You should beat Tennessee. You should beat Miami. Yes, Alabama can be a top. Alabama this season, at the time when they played them, were struggling. So I'll give you that one. But Ole Miss, yes, Ole Miss is really good this year, but you should be able to contend. They contend with them. It's just the results aren't there for Jimbo. He's failing. He's a really good recruiter. But you just can't give a guy a contract, a 10-year contract, guaranteed for $100 million, and then you sign him to an extension after going maybe like 2 seasons out of the extension he got in what was it, after he went um 9-1, and then you followed it up with 8-4, and then going 5-7. That's just inexcusable. Um, and so now he's being fired. They have to buy him out, and it's just not. It just did not work with Texas A&M, and unfortunately, a 45-25 is a good record. But when you're struggling within the SEC, that's where you're going to get fired, and you're not going to produce. And they have their best finish was a second place finish in the West and the SEC. Right now, they're at the middle of the table. They're not going to do anything. Unfortunately, it's just what happens with this in football. Honestly, I talking in previous episodes, I knew that Jimbo would be on the hot seat. I was thinking they would wait till the end of the season, but it looks like Texas A&M is done, and they had to do what they had to do. So going off of kind of segueing off of the Jimbo Fisher, we talk about the games that happened this week in the top 25. And first game we can point out is Penn State, Michigan. This was a good game. Jim Harbaugh suspended for the remaining 3 games, finding out right before the game that he can't coach. Yes, they filed a TRO and then an injunction and filed a appeal with a restraining order, but it is still being processed by the court, so he still couldn't be there. So we'll see how that turns out. You have your OC, Sharon Moore, who's also your offensive coordinator, your offensive line coach. So he steps in, does a great job, I think. Michigan, one of the most complete teams in the country. I did see a little issue with against. I think one issue to mention is it's a good and a bad thing. The bad thing is did not throw a single pass in the second half. They ran the ball 35 times. When you have running backs like Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum, you can do that, and you can rely on your run game. But when you get into a shootout where you have to throw the ball to stay in the game, that might kill you, especially with that pass rush. And we're talking about a really good Penn State pass rush. How is that going to happen when the defense of Ohio State is going to come at you? When you have the likes of Jack Sawyer, JT Tuamala, Tommy Eichenberg and those boys, Michael Hall getting down to that level downhill and putting pressure on JJ McCarthy. You're going to have to throw the ball against Ohio State. That's it's just what's going to happen because Ohio State's going to try to throw the ball as much as they can to the likes of Emeka Mbuka and Julian Fleming and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Cade Stover. They're going to throw the ball. They will rely on Trayvon Henderson, but they will throw the ball a lot. And Michigan's going to have to outshoot them. And when a good defense is going to come at you like that, they relied on the run game. And Ohio State's defense is really good this year. So top 5 in the country. But we saw good things from Michigan. I think they're really a good team, but I'm shocked not getting Roman Wilson involved. When your quarterback goes 7 of 8 passing and you rely so much on your run game, yes, that works against certain teams. But is it going to work against the big games like Ohio State at the end of the season? We'll see. It could happen. Going to the Penn State side, Drew Aller. If he had some experience and could throw the ball farther, I think he'd be good. The problem is the inexperience, being 19, being a freshman, has those issues of in those big games, you got to let it loose. you have the weapons. You have Theo Johnson. You have Tyler Warner. You have Caden Saunders. You have weapons to use. And you even have Noah Singleton in the back. He's a great receiving back. But you got to let it loose out at some point. This defense was putting you in positions to keep you in this game throughout the entire game. Kalen King had a great game except for a couple pass interference calls late in the game, which we saw against Ohio State kind of costed it. Disa Isaac was getting pressure. Chop Robinson was getting pressure. Curtis Jacobs was getting a lot of pressure. We're talking about guys that are getting pressure to the quarterback to put you in positions to win this game. They stopped Michigan a couple of times, but Drew Aller couldn't do anything with the ball. Check downs, overthrowing receivers, underthrowing receivers, not hitting the mark. That is the inexperience of the quarterback. And in certain games, you got to be on target with your passes. This game could have went very different if Drew Aller could have made those connections with his receivers and his tight ends and was able to drive down the field and get a touchdown. Because at one point, they were only 8 points behind at one point. And this is a time where late a game, this could have affected Michigan big in the college football standings and a chance to play for a national. If you beat Michigan, you'd probably jump into top 6 with this win. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. But yeah, next game to highlight: Alabama, Kentucky. Alabama comes in 49-21. Jalen Milroe, the first Alabama quarterback to have 3 touchdowns, passing and 3 running touchdowns in a single game. And there was a lot of with schools today. Jalen Milroe, he's honestly kind of talking himself into a Heisman contention going into the end of the season with the way he's playing since his benching against Texas. He has looked phenomenal. He looks better. He's not Tommy they're all OC kind of worked with Jalen and kind of tailored the offense more towards him. So he looks a lot better. He's not panicking. He's not overthrowing receivers. He's not forcing it into double coverage. He's going through his progression. We used to see he'd go through one progression, and then after that he would just stall and try to force something. Now he goes through everything. He's more smart. He's more decisive with his decision making at the quarterback level. He's looked, honestly, ever since the Texas A&M, or sorry, not Texas A&M, ever since the benching of Texas game, he has looked very, very good. And he is getting played into that conversation of, can he be a part of the Heisman conversation? Yes, he's putting himself in there towards the end. Will he be a part of it? No, due to the fact that if you look at a Heisman, they pretty much look at it from start to finish. A Heisman season is from start to finish, not from start to take a little break to finishing strong. Not starting bad and then getting good. It's you start good from the first game to the end of the game, which the other candidates, which I'll talk about in a little bit, have shown. But for anyways, Jalen Milroe is actually showing why he should be and is the starting quarterback at Alabama, and he's finally getting into a groove. And I think this has been the conversation all season about this quarterback play, because we've seen the likes of Bryce Young, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts, Greg McElroy, Blake Sims, just to name a few that have succeeded at Alabama as a quarterback. And there's a long line of really good Alabama quarterbacks that played college football. But Kentucky didn't really stand a chance. I did like what I saw from Ray Davis, showing why he's one of the best running backs in the country. I wish they got him more involved. I know that Alabama run defense is really good. You have the likes of Dallas Turner, and you have the likes of Justin Mbagu. You have a really good defense. You're talking about a very good front seven, but did have struggled in the backside due to injuries. And we saw that Kentucky kind of want to exploit that, but just couldn't get things going. Dennis Leary was having troubles getting the offense going. The run game was definitely not there. So I think that's what stopped, because throughout the season, Kentucky really relied on that run game with Ray Davis and Raymond Jefferson. And we're talking about two good um, running backs in the country. And like I said, Kentucky relies on running downhill and getting to that second and third level. But with this Alabama front seven, you're not going to get much. And unfortunately, Kentucky did not get the win because Alabama is just, they look better. The likes of a Dallas Turner on that defensive side, like I mentioned, and having Chris Braswell, one of the best tacklers in the country. He had a quiet game against UK, but he's been very good all season. And same with Dallas Turner. He's been a monster. You have the likes of on the backside, Teron Arnold, who's showing why he's one of the best DBs in the country as well. Um, but there have been some holes when you see the likes of Jalen Key being out, Malachi Moore not being totally healthy, and having some of your best defensive backs being injured, you're going to struggle. And I think on the backside, a lot of teams want to exploit that, but they're just having trouble getting the going because of so much pressure that Alabama's front seven gets to the offense. And then another game to point out, Kansas, the hype train stops here. They lose by 3 to Texas Tech, which I thought Kansas should have won. It was a close game. It was a very defensive game for the most part. And then the other game, Colorado takes another loss, falls to 4-6 on the season. So it is shocking. Shedeur Sanders, not shocking really. Shedeur Sanders has another great game, adds to his season. Xavier Weaver chips in 84 yards. Travis Hunter put in 74 on that side. But yeah, Shedeur Sanders having a great season, I think. 10 games started. He has over 3,000 yards. He's got 26 touchdowns and only turned the ball over 3 times. He has fumbled it 3 times as well, so 6 turnovers altogether. But unfortunately, he's out of the Heisman running just because of how bad Colorado has been playing on the defensive side and just not winning games. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. If you have a losing record, you're not going to be in the Heisman, and you're not going to be considered in the Heisman. And then shifting to the later games, the big games to match up on. Tennessee goes down to Mizzou, which I put Mizzou going to win that game just because I know how Tennessee is. They have a good first half, and then they just struggle throughout the game, through the second half. And I saw some good things from Tennessee. Like I mentioned, first half, they were down by 6. Second half, like I mentioned, get outscored in the third and the fourth. Mizzou puts 9 up on them, and then 14 in the fourth, and it's typical Tennessee. They played good the first 2 quarters. Second 2 quarters, they're non-existent. We saw that this year against Bama. We've seen this against Miss. We've seen this against Mizzou. It's the same story every week for Tennessee when they play. The next game is a big game that had implications in the top 5. Washington, Utah. For most of the game, this first half, watching this game, Utah was the dominant team. They were showing why they are Pac-12 bullies. Why they go in and they can beat teams. That's why you should be afraid of playing a Utah, because they might mess up your perfect season. But second half, Washington scores 11 unanswered. Penix put on another show. And we saw last week that they could rely on the run game from Dylan Johnson last week when he ran for over 254 yards for 4 touchdowns against USC. This week he ran for 104 with 1 touchdown. Michael Penix pipped in 1 rushing touchdown as well as 2 on the ground in the air for throwing for 332 yards. That is an insane number. Adunze, 3 receptions. He was quiet this week, but 3 receptions, 111 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His longest was a 44-yarder touchdown. Adunze is showing why he's one of the best receivers in the country. That is why he's up there with Malik Nabber from LSU and Marvin Harrison Jr. For Ohio State, showing, and Keon Coleman of Florida State, of why he's one of should be grouped in that group of receivers. That's a talented receiving core. And then we talk about a team that has the best, probably one of the best receiving cores in the country. We're talking about Odunze, Jalen Polk, Jeremy Bernard, and they didn't even have Jalen. They haven't really had Jalen McMillan all season. That's a very fast and good receiving core overall. Like, that can contend with some of the big boys. Like, yes, we talk about Ohio State with Mbuka and Marvin Harrison are the best duos. Troy Franklin and Tez Johnson, duos. But as a group, collectively of 4 good receivers, Washington has them. And UW is 10-0. Go 10-0. Start the season 10-0. First in Pac-12. It looks like they're on a collision course with Oregon, and I'll talk about Oregon in a little bit. So Iowa beats Rutgers 22-0. No shocker there. Pretty big upset in the later games with UCF upsetting Oklahoma State 45-3. I just don't know what happened there. Alec Boldman struggled the game. He had 3 interceptions, and John Rise Plumlee 3 touchdowns, 0 interception. I think he went 11 of 18 for almost 300 yards. They could not get anything going from Ollie Garden, who's been one of the best running backs in the country. Nothing going for that Oklahoma State team. UCF, known for really good defense, they came out and shut them down quick. Later games, we had Oklahoma beating West Virginia 59-20, as well as Oregon State, showing why they're ranked number 12, winning 62-17 against Stanford. To highlight some of the other games, North Carolina, Duke go into double overtime with North Carolina winning 47-45. A very good game, an ACC battle. Both are probably not going to be in the ACC championship game, but Grayson Loftus stepped in for Riley Leonard again, 3 touchdowns. He looked really good. Drake May, 342 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He was very quiet. It was mostly a run game. They really relied on Jordan Walters for Duke and Omari Hampton, who's showing why he's one of the best running backs in the country. 169 yards, 1 touchdown. Omari Hampton's looked good all season. He's having a very tremendous season. I think he's up there with Ollie Gordon and Audric Estime. He does find the end zone again, which he's been finding the end zone a lot. He's having a great year. He's up to about 1,000 yards on the season with 13 touchdowns. He's having, like I said, a great year. Tez Walker had a great game again, 162 yards on 7 receptions on 10 targets. He's looked pretty good. Did not find the back of the end zone, but when Drake May really only throws 1 touchdown, it's been a quiet season for him. Number wise, he's up there in passing. He's the touchdowns aren't there from last year. 21. It's still a little low, but he has turned the ball over a lot more than he did last year. But it still is a quiet season for Drake May, who is honestly arguably one of the best quarterbacks in the country and probably one of the best quarterbacks ready for the pro level. Yes, he did throw an interception. He had 1 touchdown, but he had 2 rushing touchdowns. He was for 22 yards. He had 2 touchdowns. Very well. And then when we talk about another team in Ohio State wins easily 38-3. I like what I saw from Ohio State. Another great performance against a struggling Michigan State side. They start 10-0. Marvin Harrison pretty much picked up where he left off last week. 140 yards, 2 touchdowns. and also ran for one as well for 19 yards and a touchdown. So he can do it on both phases of the ball. Kate Stuver chipped in as well to help as well. He had 79 yards and a touchdown. So Kyle McCord, I think he's starting to find his own. Yes, Michigan State isn't the best team, but it's a good place to try to find yourself. 3 touchdowns, 24 of 31 for 335 yards. Trayvon Henderson chipped in a touchdown for 60 and 63 yards. Like I mentioned, Kate Stewart, 79 yards and 1 touchdown. And Buka, didn't really see much of the ball. He struggled. He had 4 targets, 1 reception for 12 yards. They really need him to step up big. We've seen big step ups from Xavier Johnson and Cordell Tate, and especially Kate Stewart at the tight end position. But going into Michigan, you're going to need Mbuka to step up and take some pressure off of Marvin Henderson. You can't rely on Marvin Henderson and Kate Stewart the entire game because defense will adjust and kind of focus their target point on Marvin Henderson Jr. They'll double team him, they'll triple team him, they'll do whatever to stop him. The defense on the other side looked really good. Styles got to the tackle. Tyreek Williams got to the quarterback. It was all around good play from Ohio State's defense, showing why they're the top 5 in defense. Michigan State struggled. 92 yards for Hauser. Caden Hauser, he struggled. The entire offense struggled, and with the defense as well, they could not get any really pressure to the quarterback. And then the other game, we have Texas winning a close one against TCU. First game back for Quinn Ewers. They really relied on Jonathan Brooks this game. Quinn Ewers did try to sling the ball well. He converted 22 of 33 for 317 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Jonathan Brooks, though, 2 touchdowns, 104 on the ground, showing why he is honestly going through this first 10 weeks. I think he is the best running back in the country right now. It was Audric Estimé, but he's kind of trailed off towards the last few games. I got to give it to Jonathan Brooks. He's showing why he's up there with one of the best. Xavier Worthy had a great game, 10 receptions, 137 yards, no touchdowns, unfortunately, but he looked great. TCU played really good defense against Quinn. I like what I saw. It was going to be a hard-fought match down in Texas. Smash mouth football for Texas. It was kind of a shootout, yeah. On the other side, we had the likes of Savon Williams going over 100 yards, probably the best game of the season for him, with on 11 receptions, on 13 targets, or 164 yards, 1 touchdown. It was just costly at the end. I thought Josh Hoover was going to lead his team down. Unfortunately, at the end, it just did not come to it. Texas A&M holds out for 3. And now shifting to the late night games, Georgia, you get a Brock Bowers back, and they showed why they should be the number 1 team in the country, why they're the undefeated, why they're the national champions from last year. Carson Beck is definitely coming into his own over the last couple of games. I think we definitely saw it last week when he didn't have the last few games when they didn't have Brock Bowers. 18 of 25, 306 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Kendall Milton chipped in 9 rushes for 127 yards, 2 touchdowns. He looked great. Dewan Edwards chipped in with 2 touchdowns as well for 59 yards. And we talk about Brock Bowers, who came back into the game. He wasn't involved a lot. He had 1 touchdown, though. He was targeted 4 times on 3 receptions. He is kind of getting back into the flow of things, coming off of ankle surgery. They really relied on Dominic Lovett and Laddie McConkey. McConkey had a great game, 81 yards, 1 touchdown, 4 receptions. Dominic Lovett, 4 receptions on 77 yards. They really relied on the run game that got them through. It was raining. It was wet. The surface was wet. It wasn't a great atmosphere to try to throw the ball, and you rely on your run game like that. Ole Miss, I thought I expected a better performance out of Jackson Dart and the Ole Miss offense as well from the defense. It just wasn't there. It wasn't their night. When you go up against a Georgia, you're going to probably get overpowered. You're going to struggle against that team. That's why they are the number 2 team in the country. That's why we've seen no flaws from them. And then we talk about LSU Florida Florida game. Jayden McDaniels has a record-setting night. They win 50. They win 52-35 at home. He completed 17 of his 26 attempts for 376 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also rushed for 234. He averaged 19.5 yards per carry. He scored 2 of them in scoring going into the record books. Insane numbers. Let's just break this down. 1, he becomes the first FBS player to amass over 350 yards and 200 plus rushing yards in one game. Only 2 other quarterbacks have done that. Marquise Tuatapasopoa from Washington and Malik Cunningham to ever achieve these records. Malik Cunningham in 2021 for Louisville. 85. He scored an 85 touchdown run, the longest run by an LSU quarterback. And then he also carried that back up with a 51-yarder on the ground to score. He also set a single rushing yard game for 234 yards. And he also set a single game record SEC for 606 yards all-purpose. First ever person to do that since Ronald Davey did it with 540 versus Bama in 2001 was LSU's previous highest holder, but he set a record in the conference. And then we talk about number of yards that Florida allowed versus Daniels was 701. That was the most that's ever put up by the Gators. And then with this performance, he is the first player to eclipse 12,000 passing yards and 3,000 yards in a career. So he hit 12K and 3K on the ground and in the air. He is having an unbelievable season. We're talking about Jayden Daniels, LSU quarterback, probably a front runner for the Heisman right now. 30 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, over 3,000 yards. He also had on the ground 8 touchdowns. He averages 8 yards a carry, 900, almost 1,000 yards running too. This man is having a great year. Yes, their team has 3 losses on the season. Are they going to be in contention for the college football playoffs? No. Can he still win the Heisman? Yes, it's possible. You have 3 losses. 1 to Bama, which is a good loss. 1 to Ole Miss, who was ranked and is good. And then you're lost to Florida State. 3 losses that are really good. Yes, there's final ending of the season against Georgia State and Texas A&M. It's very weak at the end of the schedule. You won't play Georgia this year. Your best play was against Bama, and you lost. And it was 42-28. Yes, Jayden Daniels got knocked out of that game late, and then you get to finish the game. But can he win the Heisman? Yes. He has a positive record. It's over 500. It's 7-3. Can he win it? It's possible. I think they'll look at those 3 losses and see how close were they. The Bama game was not close. Yes, like I mentioned, he got injured. The Florida State game wasn't close. And the Ole Miss game, that was close. So 1 close loss and 2 not so close losses to really good teams. And we're going to say Jayden McDaniels this, Jayden McDaniels that. I think Jayden Daniels can be in conversation for the Heisman. I don't think he'll win it, but he'll definitely be on the podium when it all comes down to that. Next, the last game. I'll talk about UC real quick. UC gets their first win after 7 straight losses in play. They go to Houston and beat them 24-14. Emory Jones has a good game. 13 of 16, 1 touchdown for 131 yards. They really relied on Corey Kiner. Corey Kiner ran the ball 23 times for 129 yards and 2 touchdowns. He looked very good. And then Braden Smith on the receiving led the receivers with 69 yards, 5 receptions. The touchdown was to Ryan Montgomery, Deshaun Pace, and Dorian Jones, both interceptions, as well as
Ken Willis, our defensive back, got some pressure to the quarterback. Didn't have a whole lot. They picked off Houston's quarterback, Donovan Smith, 3 times. Donovan Smith struggled, as well as Houston just struggling. I think this was a good matchup for the Bearcats. They get the job done, and they get their first win in the Big 12. It's gonna take time. Like I said, it's just gonna take time. They end a 7-game losing streak dating back all the way to September. It is unfortunate, but can they finish the season off strong with West Virginia and Kansas? I know Kansas is a good team, so we'll see how it goes. And then the last game of the week that we can touch on is Oregon USC. We're talking about 2 good quarterbacks, 2 good teams. And it was a hot start to begin the game. First play of the game for the Ducks is a 77-yarder from Bo Nix to Tez Johnson. The second play, second possession Oregon had in the first quarter was a 84-yarder to Troy Franklin, putting them 14-7 or 13-7 with the 2-point conversion failed. And it was just Oregon pretty much the entire game. Yes, USC scored to make it close going into halftime, but then it was all Oregon in the second half. Bo Nix had an unbelievable game. Let's talk about it. Bo Nix, 23 of 31, 412 yards, career season high in yards, 4 touchdowns, not sacked at all. Bucky Irvin chipped in 118 yards on 19 rushes, 1 touchdown. Looked great. Tez Johnson, 7 receptions, 2 touchdowns, 126 yards. Terrence Ferguson, 6 receptions, 60 yards, 1 touchdown. And we talk about Troy Franklin, who's been having an unbelievable season, playing himself into a bridge first round, probably second round, third round pick. Troy Franklin was quiet, 2 receptions, but he had 147 yards and a touchdown. He was getting double teamed, and we could rely on Tez for the most part. And we talk about a guy that played very good on the defensive side, Evan Williams, the brother Bennett Williams, 5 tackles, 3 assisted tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, 1 fumble recovery. Jeffrey Bossa, the leader of that defense, looked great. Brandon Dorless gets a quick sack in the beginning of the game. Jordan Burrs, Tuatoloyi, and Dorless and Jacobs are getting to the quarterback. They're putting pressure. We saw that. We saw Caleb Williams having to scramble and create something with his feet, or throwing the ball away, or throwing the ball at the ground. He couldn't do anything. There was so much pressure to get to Caleb Williams last night that Caleb Williams struggled. The cornerbacks played great. Tyree Jackson played a really good game until he went out with an injury with his arm. And then we brought in a Tyrese Bridge, who honestly had a good game. Yes, he let that touchdown happen against Brendan Rice, but right before that, he made a great play to break it up. You're not going to win every game. And the defense stepped up big time. I think we're talking about complete teams and playing really good teams throughout the course of the season. Georgia has been I would say one of the most complete teams, but they haven't played anyone. Same with Michigan. I say those 2 teams are complete. Oregon is a complete team, all phases of the ball. They fixed the defensive woes early on in the season. They played good teams, and they're beating teams. It's not like, and their closest game was the loss to Washington, and that was just by a field goal. If you kick a field goal at the end of halftime, you get the ball back in the second half. That game could have been totally different with Oregon, and Oregon could have won that game easily. It was down to a field goal. Every other game has been a blowout or a smash. Like, yes, USC scored at the very end to make the score look a little bit closer, but Oregon dominated. Oregon stopped, and they stopped USC. USC really couldn't do it. Caleb Williams, 291 yards, 9 of 34, 1 touchdown. We kept him to 1 touchdown in the air, and he ran for what? We kept Austin Jones and Marshawn Lloyd to almost maybe 60 yards combined. We shut down Brendan Rice. We shut down Doran Singer. We shut down Tyjaw Washington. These guys did not have great games. And then the quarterbacks. Our offensive line is so good. Did not let anyone get to Bo. 0 sacks for the defense, as well as Oregon getting to Caleb. a lot. Got to him 3 times. Put so much pressure on him. One of the best pass rushers in college football has to be Brandon Dorless. He is showing why he is playing himself into the conversation of being a fringe second-round pick, maybe a fringe first-round pick. But Oregon looks pretty good. I think Bo Nix solidified himself in the Heisman running with this performance. It's just an unbelievable game. Oregon will have a date with destiny against Washington at the end of the season. There's no way if they can avoid the trap game at the end of the season versus I believe it's Arizona State. If they can avoid the trap game against them, against a former coach and Ken Dillingham, the former offensive coordinator, and then go into Oregon State in the Civil War game to wrap up the final Pac-12 rivalry in the Civil War in the Pac-12 era. If they can go in, beat them, it's a date with Washington. And honestly, Washington has not looked great since the Oregon game. They have struggled of late. So I think Oregon can come out at the end of the season when it's all said and done with a Pac-12 championship and a berth into the college football playoffs, because Bama still has to play Georgia. Ohio State still has to play Michigan. One of those teams are going to lose. One of those teams are not going to have a conference championship, which could keep them out of the college football playoffs, which could give Oregon a leg in if they win their conference championship. To end this episode, after the games have ended, we'll talk about my Heisman positions right now. It has to be Jayden Daniels, just for the unbelievable performance he has put on over the course of the season. Yes, 3 losses isn't great, but when you put up numbers like this, you are number 1. Number 2 has to be Bo Nix. Bo Nix, 4 touchdowns this week, over 400 yards, beats USC pretty easily. You're 2. Number 3, I would probably have to go with Marvin Harrison Jr. He's shown why he's the best receiver in the country, the best skill position player in college football. I don't think he's the best college football player in the country, but he has the best skill position in the country. I think there's better players. Actually, sorry. I would say he's at 4. My bad. He's 4. I would go Michael Penix Jr. And the fact that, yes, his numbers are great. They're undefeated. But the team has struggled over the last few weeks, which I just think Jayden Daniels and Bo Nix are outplaying Penix right now. But Penix should be on the podium at the end of the day if they stay undefeated. And if they do stay undefeated by the end of the season, they win the Pac-12 championship, give him the Heisman, because he's had an unbelievable season. At 5, since I did Marvin Harrison at 4, 5 would be Jordan Travis. Jordan Travis for Florida State has had a great season all year. He has a couple, pretty much the best one of the season was against LSU for him, and he played unbelievable in that game. I think he deserves it. I think he's up there within the Heisman. And then at number 6, J.J. McCarthy. He's shown why he should be in this conversation. Yes, 7 of 8 passing for only not a ton of yards is concerning. 7 of 8 for 60 yards against Penn State, a really good defense, because they really relied on the run game. The numbers aren't there with the Penixes and the Bo Nixes and the Jordan Travises of the world. But he's still having a great season. They're undefeated. They're one of the most complete teams in the country, and they just took down Penn State. So he should be in that conversation. And honestly, someone that is kind of going underrated that should be putting himself into the conversation has to be Blake Corum. Blake Corum has been pretty. Yes, the yards aren't there, but he has 18 touchdowns, and they rely so heavily on him. I think he's sneaking his way in there, just into the top 10. So hopefully, by the end of the season, we can kind of nail down who is going to be in this conversation for the Heisman. It's anyone's race at this point. There's no clear-cut favorite, so I can't wait to see how the rest of the season turns out. But yeah, that's pretty much our episode today. It's a special because I brought it out right after games happen, so it's fresh in my mind. So definitely keep an eye out for our other episodes. We did release our new NFL, our other college football episode previewing the games, our soccer previewing Columbus Crew, who are playing today, which I might have something released for you guys after the game. And then our college basketball second episode is out. NBA will be soon. We'll kind of talk about some of the playing tournament, and some news. Like we know, we really haven't touched much about the James Harden trade, but once we get onto the episode, we'll definitely talk about it. But yeah, check us out on Spotify and YouTube. Turn on that notification so you don't miss a beat, and you can get all of our notifications for our episodes. Follow us on Instagram and X at Net to Net Podcast, Net to Net Podcast, and I'll see you guys with our next episode. But yeah, peace.